Hello and welcome to MBA 6103 Managing Innovation. My name is Dr. Ryan Tipton and I'm the Vice President for Distance Learning and Technology at University of the Southwest. In this unit, we'll be discussing what innovation is. This unit essentially serves as an introduction to the course and will provide a background about innovation, the different types of innovation, the different dimensions for creating an innovative organization, and why we're concerned about putting together an innovation strategy for an organization. So to provide a backdrop for the class, this course is pretty fun and interesting because we get to discuss a lot of the new and exciting things that companies are doing, both in the private and public sectors. If you've looked ahead into Unit 1, you can see that your assignment or your complete section for this week talks about the innovation in the music industry. And that's something that most of us are familiar with, the change in the music industry because of MP3s and the iPod and now the self-publishing for new artists, for independent music. So we get to talk about new and exciting things happening both in technology companies and service companies, manufacturing companies. There's all kinds of ways, or all kinds of situations when we can find innovation in action, so to speak. Innovation has really become a buzzword in business because successful organizations today realize that if they're not constantly innovating and developing new concepts, new ideas, new products, new services, then they'll very quickly be outdated. And so innovation has become a specialization, kind of a specialty for those individuals that focus on strategy, senior level executives, senior level managers, directors, consultants, folks like that whom have a vested interest in the success of organizations and try to develop these big picture strategies for the companies for which they work. So we get to talk about the strategic side of innovation and how it affects companies today. So again, this class is a lot of fun. We get to talk about new and relevant interesting cases, many of which you'll probably be familiar with. Again, we open with Unit 1 here when we talk about what is innovation. The example in the complete section and the case for this unit deals directly, again, with the music industry and Apple and all the things that are taking place there. So we'll get to talk about that and what parallels there are between that industry and some of the other industries that we're familiar with. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first question we often ask is, why are we concerned about innovation? Why is this important? Why is innovation something that so many companies are interested in getting right? And the answer to that question comes from what we typically refer to as the growth imperative. If we look at organizations today, there is so much pressure for, especially the publicly traded companies, the public companies, there's so much pressure from investors to constantly be growing, consistently be growing. In the public market, the stock market and public investors, they want to invest in companies that can consistently show double-digit growth year after year after year. Well, as an executive and as an entrepreneur, we know that is incredibly difficult to accomplish. It's very difficult to consistently show growth quarter after quarter, year after year. However, investors are looking for growth, and so we have what we call the growth imperative. The whole dynamic of investors and the stock market and how we measure successful organizations, it's changed from decades ago when we used to look at organizations who could provide just a simple, consistent dividend, and we'd be happy with that as investors. And we can blame that on technology. We can blame that on the dot-com bubble in the late 90s. We can blame that on recent growth in the technology sector and some of the other industries that have shown substantial growth in the recent years. We are looking for strong growth as investors. And so we put pressure on these companies, on organizations, to constantly be growing. Well, how do they do that? How can these companies consistently grow in double digits every year consistently? Now, often we would look at, these companies have to be rolling out new products and new services and be constantly expanding their market space. And that's true. Now, how do they do that? Well, it's not enough to simply be looking for ways to revamp what you currently do, or just continue to do what you do forever, because we know that competition has become so fierce that if you're not constantly innovating, pretty soon you'll be out of business. And why is that? Why will you be out of business pretty soon? Well, your competitive advantage can't last because of a number of reasons. I mean, your competitors have access to unlimited information instantly because of, obviously, the internet and interconnectedness of industries and globalization. We now can find out what products and services companies are going to offer immediately, and we have access to that information. So if you're not constantly innovating, pretty soon one of your competitors is going to do the same thing that you do, either better, cheaper, or faster. So we look to innovation as a way to improve processes or efficiency as well. We often think that innovation simply means coming up with the next iPad, or the next Keurig coffee pot, or the next MP3 player, or something of that nature that completely changes the market. And that might be. However, innovation can come in the form of both services, products, processes, process improvement, improving efficiencies, reducing costs to consumers, again, building products better, cheaper, and faster. These are all ways that we can be constantly innovating. And we'll provide, throughout the course, we'll provide examples of companies that have brought about disruptive innovations by offering new products or services that completely changed the market and created new market space and almost eliminated competition overnight. And we'll also look at examples of companies that have created a sustainable competitive advantage through improving their own processes. Toyota is a great example of this. Toyota has focused on what we refer to as just-in-time manufacturing, being able to improve their processes, their manufacturing processes, to a point where they can customize automobiles on the assembly line halfway around the world to meet demand in an entirely different country. If demand for a Toyota 4Runner in a country halfway around the world has increased, and there's dealerships all over that particular region or area that are selling a lot of those automobiles, they can change or shift their manufacturing process in a different country to meet that demand almost in real time. And that's because they use technology and they use this just-in-time manufacturing process to do that. So a company like Toyota has been able to create sustainable competitive advantage through process improvement, which is an innovation. You compare that to a company like Amazon, who is offering, say, a product like the Kindle Fire to support their retail business. That's an entirely different type of innovation. That's offering a product. It's a product innovation. So we're going to talk about both of those types of things and how to build strategies around innovation that do exactly this right here, that serve to create a sustainable competitive advantage for your organization. It's not enough any longer to simply create a competitive advantage. Companies now must look to creating a sustainable competitive advantage. How can we build a competitive advantage that we can sustain year after year, quarter after quarter, year after year down the road? And this ties back to that growth imperative. It's imperative for us to be continually growing. We look at innovation through kind of two different lenses here. And these two bullet points right here are basically saying the same thing. You'll find that innovation is often referred to as being either incremental or radical, which is the same thing as saying sustaining or disruptive. And we're going to talk about those here in a moment, because incremental means the same as sustaining when we talk about innovation. Incremental means the same as sustaining, and radical means the same as disruptive. Those terms are pretty much synonymous with one another in the innovation, in the field of innovation. And I'll say again, the study of innovation as a strategic initiative is relatively new. I mean, we're basically talking about a field of study or a strategic component that has really just become popular or become something that organizations realize they've got to do in the last few years. It's something that was kind of always in the background before, because we knew that innovation existed. If you think back to the days of VHS, the battle between VHS and Betamax, I think it was an example of an innovation battle. If you think about when DVDs came out and replaced VHS, that was an example of disruptive innovation, replacing an existing product or service. And when we first started seeing the battle for Blu-ray, there was an innovation battle taking place there as well. There was Blu-ray versus HD DVDs, and they kind of fought that battle out, and it turns out Blu-ray won. So, we can look back in history at these disruptive innovations and these kind of competitive battles that have taken place in those industries. But most of the time, innovation comes in the form of either incremental or sustaining, which is the same thing, or radical or disruptive, which is the same thing. In other words, innovation is either something that just kind of makes a small change and allows an organization or an industry to just make small changes or adjustments to products or services and extend that life cycle, or something comes along and completely changes the market for that product or service. And we're going to talk about those here in a moment. And we're concerned about innovation because we're interested in creating new market space. If we're constantly trying to grow and continue to grow our organization year after year, we've got to be concerned about creating new market space. But there's only so much room for so many competitors for certain products before those products become what we call commoditized, or in other words, everybody is creating a competitive product. They're very similar. They're hard to distinguish the differences between them, and then their profit margins diminish. So we're constantly looking for new market space. And in doing that, we're concerned about crafting an innovation strategy. Because we know that we've got to do all of these things, we know that in order to be successful at it, we've got to create what we call an innovation strategy. And that's the focus of this class, is understanding what innovation is, being able to recognize the need for innovation, and then ultimately be able to create an innovation strategy. So in Unit 1, you're asked to review the case that talks about innovation in the music industry. And this is pretty interesting. It's an interesting way to open up a discussion about innovation because it's something that most of us are familiar with. Most of us are familiar with downloading music either from iTunes or Amazon MP3. Most of us at some point or another have probably had an iPod. You might now not even use an iPod. You might just keep your music on your cell phone, your smartphone, or your iPad, or your tablet, or you might keep it in the cloud, Google Music, or SkyDrive, or iCloud, or any of those cloud storage services. But if we look back on the music industry and the transition that has taken place in the music industry over the last 5 to 10 years probably, we really see some good examples of innovation. And so we start with the digital music file. That's kind of really what sparked the innovation in the music industry. The ability to take the music that was on your CD and convert it to a file on your computer. And before iTunes, before the iPod, and right before all of that, we had never had that ability before. And now all of a sudden have the ability to take your CD and convert it to a digital file on your computer. It set the stage for innovation to take place. And that innovation began with, obviously, file sharing service. We all know the story of Napster. But by having the technology which allowed music to be converted to MP3 file, an MP3 file, it set the stage or created a platform for delivery. It created a platform created the foundation for innovation. So now we had this ability to exchange music digitally. We had the ability to share music digitally. And so all of a sudden, the music industry realized that innovation was about to take place. If there was only a platform for delivery that was consistent amongst users, then all of a sudden there wouldn't be as much of a need for the big music publishing houses, their big record labels, and even music stores. All of a sudden, we needed, or we were going to have the ability to eliminate a lot of that. And so Napster came along first and had a file sharing service. Well, as with any disruptive innovation, the industry is going to push back, and it did. It pushed back with Napster, the lawsuits from the artists and the record labels and the publishing houses and that kind of thing, because intellectual property rights were being violated and copyrights were being violated through file sharing. But that didn't, it was almost as though the cat was kind of out of the bag at that point. And so now all we needed was a consistent platform, a legitimate platform to allow consumers to purchase their music digitally, put it on a device to take it with them, and eliminate the need for CDs, record labels, big music houses, music stores, all of those things. And that's where Apple obviously came in and completely revolutionized, completely changed the music business. It began with the MP3 file sharing and Napster, and then Apple was able to create a platform for delivery, which was iTunes, obviously, software that allowed individuals to purchase individual songs, allowed consumers to purchase individual songs rather than entire CDs, which was a innovation in itself. But in addition to that, Apple created hardware for the consumer, which was the iPod, which allowed their consumers to take their music with them on a very small, discrete device that did not take up much space. And that entire process created a recipe for disruption. By having the technology in the MP3 files, by having a platform for delivery through iTunes, and by having hardware for the consumer to use and consume their music, the product itself, we had a recipe for disruption. Almost overnight, we saw a mass exodus from the traditional music transaction, which was an artist would create their music, they would go to a record label would sign them, put them in the studio, they'd record the music, they'd give them a contract, they'd publish a new, or record a new CD, publish it, send it out to music stores, people would go buy the CD. That entire process obviously took a lot of time, was very expensive. You'd go buy a CD for $15. Of that $15, the artist would usually get $1 or $2. The rest would go to the record label, the manufacturing of the CD, the printing and the recording, printing and burning of the CDs, and the shipping and the logistics to send the CDs to the music stores. The music stores then have to obviously mark up the CD to make some money themselves. And all of that was almost eliminated overnight. I mean, when was the last time you went into a music store? So we had a complete transformation of an entire industry that had one simple, I say simple, but I mean obviously it's complicated, but one simple disruption or disruptive technology, disruptive innovation was able to completely eliminate or destroy an entire industry and rebuild it in an entirely different way. And so now with the music industry, artists can go straight to iTunes, they can go straight to Amazon, record the music, upload their music, and sell it directly. $1 a song, of which the artist gets to keep half, which is more than what they got to keep of the sale of a CD. Consumers are happier because they get to buy individual songs. They get cheaper and don't have to go to a store to buy it. They just download it. And so we had a complete disruption, a complete change in the music industry. And that story, that the kind of the case analysis of the music business really sets the stage for this entire class, because that is probably one of the best examples of disruptive innovation in our recent history that really captures what this course is all about. If you were an executive in the music business, in the music industry, and you had been an executive for a record label for years, chances are you never would have thought that you'd be out of business today simply because of software, because of the ability of consumers to download their music directly and put it on an iPod and take it with them, the ability of artists to go directly to somebody like iTunes or Amazon and publish their music directly and sell it directly. We eliminated all of those retail channels and consequently destroyed an industry and rebuilt it in an entirely different way. So if you were an executive in the music business years ago and didn't recognize the importance of innovation, then where would you be now? We can make the same case for the print publishing business. Books, print books. Because we have the same recipe for disruption that is taking place right now in the book business, in the publishing business, print publishing. We already know that most newspapers, or many newspapers, sales have declined. They're suffering. They're hurting. A lot of newspapers do not even physically print their newspaper anymore. It's only available online. The same is true of magazines. And it's becoming more and more the same is true of physical books. The model was the same. If you were an author and you wrote a book, you would send your manuscript out to the big publishing houses, and hope that one of them decided to print your book for you. They would give you a contract. They'd agree to print, say, 500,000 copies of hardcover books, and then you'd sell that hardcover book for $20, of which you'd get $1 or $2, very similar to the musician. Almost overnight, again, that entire model has changed now because of innovation. The ability to print on demand, the ability to write your book, go straight to Amazon, publish it, do Amazon self-publishing, publish it, make it available via ebook through the Amazon Kindle. And it completely eliminates all those other channels, the middlemen, the publishing houses, the distributors. Why do you think that so many bookstores have been struggling and going out of business? Borders, prime example. Because their business model was built on selling books. Well, people aren't buying as many books anymore. They're downloading them, they're putting them on their iPad, their tablet, their Kindle, their phone. So it's completely eliminated. Disruptive innovation has completely eliminated that, or eliminating that industry. So when we discuss innovation, we talk about two types, like I'd mentioned before, two types of innovation. We can either have incremental or sustaining innovations, and those, again, mean the same thing. And so you'll hear me refer to incremental innovation, or you'll hear me refer to sustaining innovation, but those are the same thing. What a sustaining innovation is something simple that all it does is exploit an existing process or technology and allows organizations, companies to kind of extend a product life cycle. We often see sustaining innovations come in the form of kind of upgrades or simple improvements to an existing product. The best example I can think of right now is the battle in the smartphone market. Apple, or in technology. Let's use Apple as another example. Every year releases a new version of the iPhone. The iPhone 4, the iPhone 5, the iPhone 6, the iPad 2, 3, 4, and you have some simple upgrades or some reconfiguration of something that already exists. That's a sustaining innovation. It's something that simply sustains that product life cycle, that allows the iPhone or the iPad to be a product in existence for consumers longer. So sustaining innovations or incremental innovations are those that simply improve or reconfigure something that already exists and just allows consumers to enjoy that product longer, make an upgrade and move on. We refer to this as innovation at the margins, very marginal innovation. What might seem like a very significant improvement in the product, it's still just an improvement in an already existing product. Let's say that the latest version of the Galaxy S3 or S4 phone is now offers eye scrolling. I think was the latest article that I read recently. You can use your eyes to scroll to scroll your phone, or that's been discussed or something like that. So you're talking about adding a really neat new feature. So it is innovative. It's new, but it's not completely changing the cell phone game or the smartphone game. So it's marginal innovation. Again, it serves to kind of extend the life cycle of an existing product. And we often see it in the form of upgrades or improvements to existing products or services. So if we think about why this is important, we have to be able to understand the product life cycle itself. You've probably seen this before, something like this before. The product life cycle is pretty much the same. They're very consistent amongst industries. We typically have a new product that is introduced here, and during this, right before introduction, we have product development, which takes place out here. But once a product is developed and it's ready to introduce to the public, you see this happen. You have very little or no profit because you'll have those early adopters. You'll have a few folks that begin to buy the product, and then right about here is when people begin realizing that it's a good product and it's something that they want or need or could use, and it serves a need, and that kind of thing. So we see an increase in sales, a substantial increase in sales. So the sales of the product begins to grow, so we see growth here. But then eventually, as with all products, that product will mature and the market will become saturated. There will become a time when so many consumers have that product that it's so saturated in the marketplace that there aren't that many more consumers for you to go sell that product to. And so sales begin to decline, and eventually that product is replaced by something else. So if you think of innovation, think of a lot of these curves kind of one right after the other. Well, what sustaining innovations do is they allow us to extend this just a little bit. So maybe the maturity for that product is out here, and then it comes down this way. Because consumers are upgrading their products. They're trading in their Galaxy S3 for Galaxy S4. They're trading in their iPhone 4 for an iPhone 5. So the iPhone is still popular, or the Galaxy S4 is still popular as a product, but people are upgrading. Because what the challenge that we face especially in the technology business, the challenge we face is this product life cycle has become so compressed. It becomes so shortened. Think about the smartphone business. You could go out today and purchase the latest and greatest smartphone, whether it's the iPhone 5 or the Galaxy S4, the latest and greatest smartphone. In about 3 to 6 months, your phone will be outdated. There will be something better. Same is true of computers. Same is true of tablets. Anything in the technology business, televisions, TVs, you could go out and buy the latest, greatest flat screen, high def television. And in about 6 months, it'll be outdated and there'll be something significantly better. So we are talking about an industry, especially in technology, you're talking about a shortened or a compressed life cycle of products. Whereas before, products had a good few years that they would have a solid life cycle. So now companies realize that in order to extend that life cycle, we got to have some sustaining innovations. We got to give consumers a way to upgrade, or consumers a way to make use of that product a little bit longer. Part of the reason why we get upgrades to our software, automatic upgrades to software, is because we're trying to extend those product life cycles. So sustaining or incremental innovations help us do that. They help keep or maintain that sustainable competitive advantage a little bit longer. Now, this is significantly different than what we refer to as radical or disruptive innovations. The example that I just gave earlier when we were talking about the music business and Apple and iTunes and the iPod, that was an example of radical or disruptive innovation. Something new was created, something that completely changed the way people purchased or used a product or service. Something completely new, completely different. Pretty much considered a divergence from the norm. Something that's not normal, something that's completely different, or you would have to, as a consumer, you would have to diverge or change from what you normally do with that product or service. Going back to the music business, people would normally, when their favorite band released a new CD, they would normally go down to the local music store and purchase the entire CD for one or two songs that they're happy with. What the MP3 and iTunes and the iPod all did for the music business, it completely changed consumers' behavior. No longer would consumers go down to their local music store to purchase the CD for their favorite band. Instead, they would just download that one song that they like, put it on their iPod, put it on their phone. So radical or disruptive innovations, they have the potential to upset existing business models, to completely change existing business models, change the way consumers do business, and consequently change the way firms or businesses have to transact or have to do business or have to market or have to compete. We refer to this often as creating new market space, creating an entirely new market, sometimes at the expense of an existing market, which was the case of the music industry and is quickly becoming the case of the print publishing industry. Creating a new market at the expense of an existing one, completely eliminating sometimes eliminating an entire form of competition. Completely eliminating entire form of competition and causing firms to have to compete in a different arena. Sometimes firms can't make the transition. They go out of business. They cease to exist because they can't compete in that new format. So as we go throughout this class, we're going to clearly distinguish between radical and disruptive innovations. Sustaining and disruptive innovations. We're going to clearly distinguish between those two things. We're going to provide examples of both, and we're going to focus on both, because there's a purpose. Both sustaining innovations and disruptive innovations, they serve a purpose. There's a need for both of those things. In this class, we're also going to focus on innovation as a process, because we can sit and discuss innovation all day long in hindsight. We can look back in hindsight and talk about the music business, talk about the publishing business, talk about all of these different industries that have been affected by innovation. And that's great in hindsight. But that doesn't do us any good as executives or managers today if we don't have a process internal to our organization that allows us to create innovation, foster an environment that encourages innovation. If we don't create an innovative organization that is constantly looking for ways to improve products, processes, or services, then we're not going to make it. We'll be in a situation where eventually something comes along that changes the entire business model, and we're out of business because we weren't innovative. We weren't, trying to improve, create new market space, and be innovative. So we're going to focus on 4 dimensions of innovation space. First is product innovation, which that's pretty simple. We can develop an entirely new innovative product that will revolutionize a particular industry. A great example is the Keurig coffee pot. The single serve Keurig with the K-cups, that is a product innovation. Completely changed and created a new market space for single serve coffee, and we'll use that as an example in the lectures ahead as well. We'll focus on the next P, the next dimension of innovation space is process innovation. We can find innovative ways to improve processes. I gave the example of Toyota earlier. Position innovation. We start looking at internal characteristics of the organization. We can look at paradigm innovations. So we're going to go through all 4 dimensions of innovation space and try to figure out how we can put these things together for innovation strategies. That's the focus of this class, is assemble these things to eliminate existing forms of competition and create innovation strategies. Because you've got to be able to put them together in a way that makes sense for your organization. And you'll see the interaction here. You'll see how we have these 4 P's of innovation space: process, product, paradigm, position. So, and within each one, we can have incremental or radical, also known as sustaining or disruptive innovation. And so how they all of these different dimensions kind of come together, that's what forms our innovation strategy. So be thinking about that as you work on the complete section, the assignment this week, the case study that we've kind of already discussed, as well as the discussion question this week. Be thinking about when you're using examples of innovation, are those examples sustaining or incremental, or are they radical, disruptive? So, because it's important to recognize the difference between the two, because that's how we're going to put all these things together to create innovation strategies. So that pretty much wraps up Unit 1, which is basically an introduction to the class. And hope you enjoy it, and look forward to the rest of the course.